Great, thank you so much. I think what we'll do is we'll start kicking off. Thank you for those who've turned up. I'm Ollie. I'm one of the co-founders at Count, and it's great to be with you on discussing metric trees and how Count is. We see a lot of our customers using Count for building metric trees. I'll hope to keep this content to about 30 minutes or so. I think that would be a sensible amount of time. Hopefully, go through the journey. For those of you who are here, we're recording this video. If you have a problem with that, please keep your camera off, as we're sharing this around to all attendees, focusing mostly on the one I'm presenting. And if you have any questions, please add them to the chat, as you'd expect. I'd love to hear questions, particularly at the end. We'll have time for questions and wrap up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this time, as you can see, I've already shared my screen. We're already in Count right now. Let me just talk you through the agenda for the session, how I'm going to structure this. So firstly, you're going to do a very brief introduction to metric trees, in case that's a thing which you're exploring. I imagine so if you're here. Explain a bit of the theory behind them, just to make sure that there's a context setting here. We can share more resources later about more of this theory, so we won't dwell on it too much. We'll then move on to talk about why Count. What is Count? How does it work? For those of you who aren't customers already, we'll make sure you understand Count and its full broader context, because metric trees is only one of the capabilities of Count. And then we'll also attempt to do a live build of a metric tree within the canvas. That's my challenge I set myself, or more importantly, my team set me. And I will do that for you, just talk you through the workflow, talk you through the features. It's a really good example of why a kind of canvas-based analytics platform and modeling platform is so powerful. So we'll do that. And then I will, what we'll build obviously will be a relatively simple metric tree, but then we'll move on to a fully worked out example. And I'll talk you through how we found our customers who have built a metric trees in Count, how it's changed their relationship between the wider business they're working with, and how it helps streamline their own operation. We'll have some tips on building your own, and then we'll have time for questions as well. And so the questions might take us beyond 30 minutes. If you want to stick around for questions, that'd be fantastic. If there's any questions already or anything that you'd like me to cover, please dump it into the chat, and I will try and pick it up as we go along. And feel free to ask questions as we go. I might come back to it at a later point in the session if it's appropriate, but I'll make sure I try and answer everyone's questions either at the end or during the session. Okay, hope that makes sense. As you can see, we're walking through the whole thing we built in Count. It's one of the powers of the platform is that it's more than just doing numbers. It is also a place to present, think, and clearly do webinars too. So let's move on. Firstly, let's talk about what metric trees are. So at its simplest, and I will be quick on this because I said you probably already know metric trees are in some form. Metric trees are a visual representation of the growth model of your business. It's designed to let you show the causal relationships between different activity drivers, which we would say are metrics. And then those metrics are laid out in a tree format, as you'd imagine, to show the relative importance of these metrics and how they all lead to business value. The core idea of a metric tree is that it is about mapping your business growth model in a semantic way, which allows the visual layout of the metrics to make the growth model, the kind of relative importance of these metrics relate to each other, feel very clear. The benefits of a metric tree, though it's a kind of simple idea, are very, very powerful. Firstly, they create a very strong mental model of the business. One of the things we often talk about a lot in Count is how can the data teams help a business more? How to drive value? Well, one of the best ways a data team can drive value is to articulate to the business and improve the business's understanding of its growth model and what is driving it. And a metric tree is a great way to visualize that kind of paradigm. Secondly, it moves the conversation by the nature of the fact you have this cascading set of metrics. Metric trees move the conversation away from what is happening to why. It gives you a way of naturally drilling down, understanding how the performance of different areas of the business lead to an outcome, lead to your North Star metric. And then the third benefit is, one of the things we've most seen from our customers is the ability for a metric tree to just reduce the amount of data assets that need to be in the business to make the business's operational context clear. So one of the most important theories we have on what a data team should be able to do is create signal from noise, simplify how the complicated business feels, and create the best signal of what's going on as possible with the least amount of information. And metric trees also do that. Let me just quickly show you the visual power of a metric tree to make this point clear. So here we are in Count. This is a very quick dashboard I built in Count about an hour ago. As you can see, it's this traditional dashboard of various metrics: profit, cost of goods sold, revenue, shipping costs. These are high-level metrics which are very much P&L level lines laid out in the traditional grid of a dashboard. And this is a typical dashboard at a high level for a kind of e-commerce business. Now, these same metrics can also be laid out in a metric tree format, and that would look like this. So you can see here that we have the same number of charts as in here, but suddenly the relative importance of these metrics feels much more clear. How they relate to each other is also clear. You can see the shape of the charts and the metrics, how they all combine together to give you various metrics. You can almost work out the relative importance. The shape of the metrics and how they're relating to each other is also available. And instantly, the shape of the business, the shape of the P&L is being articulated too. Same amount of data, much better, much clearer layout. So I hope this helps as a very quick example of the power of metric trees, the power of presentation, and how moving away from a grid format gives you a kind of abnormally high amount of clarity about what's really going on in the business. We'll come on to show you more examples of metric trees as we go, but I hope this quickly gives you a sense of really the goal here, and we'll also focus on how you build this out and how to use this as we go. So, why Count then? What is Count, and why are we talking this all through with Count? So, as you can probably tell, Count is an analytics and data modeling tool built around the paradigm of an infinite collaborative canvas. So we have built Count to become a place where a data team can work with the business closer and work more collaboratively together between different departments of a business in a data team to work through the entire analytical workflow from scoping, data modeling, visualization and exploration to presentation in one infinite canvas, which is collaborative and much more expressive. So the capabilities of Count is kind of a new category, we believe, where it has the combination of like a Miro or Figma whiteboard, a SQL editor, and a DBT IDE, which we'll come on to in a bit, a BI tool, and a notebook. And the core principles of these capabilities is that it gives you flexibility and scale, flexibility to have the space to lay out metrics in a non-conventional form, flexibility and scale to have many objects. You work through the complexity of your business and simplify it down to deal with that complexity. It gives you transparency because you're able, as you choose, to share not just your end result, but as we'll discuss when it comes to metric tree building, the transparency of the metrics and the numbers that you're building, you can show how you've got them and make that something which the wider business understands. And as you work collaboratively as a team, and obviously it's collaborative. And the collaborative means you're able to work more agilely, the time to value is much shorter, and you can share knowledge and share code and problem solve together as a data team or as a wider business. When Count is working at its best, what it's enabling is the following groups of people or the following skills to work through things in one place. So it's a place where ultimately data analysts or analytics engineers can do data exploration, deep diving, using the space of the canvas to explore data. It's also a place where data analysts can work closely with business users to problem solve, tell stories, and build metric trees in a way which the business users understand and are bought into, and help them and communicate that clarity, that signal from noise. But it's also a place where our data analysts can work with other parts of the data organization or even in the engineering function on data modeling and data engineering to make sure that the pipelines that you're building are prototyped well, that debugging is happening, and you're managing your models as the workflow and the requirements of the business become clear. And as we'll go through the metric tree example, when these three groups of people are working seamlessly together, where there's no silos and true visibility across the full requirements and the modeling requirements in one place, that's when magic really starts to happen. And I'll hopefully show you that to you a bit as we go through the rest of the webinar. So just a final explanation of Count to make sure this all makes sense and how you can relate it to your own space. We consider Count to be a collaborative analytics platform, as I mentioned. So a lot of our customers, I think probably about 40% of our customers, use Count alongside an existing traditional BI tool. Traditional BI tool being a place where you're maybe building key reports, you may be doing some degree of simple self-service. But the key point about the kind of traditional BI tools is that they're consumption tools, they're operational reporting tools. They let business users consume data on a regular basis, which is trusted and understood. The power of Count comes in the fact that it lets you do the following use cases, such as storytelling, requirements gathering, problem solving, and data modeling. And these are, by definition, almost the high value activities that a data team or data practitioner is using to drive value with the business. And these need to be done collaboratively and iteratively to make them make sense and land well. And that's where Count really comes in. And in addition, as you can probably tell, we are used a lot for a combination of KPI reporting and storytelling, used to disrupt the dashboard paradigm for customers who wish to use us as a full traditional BI tool as well. So we can be a complement or a full BI solution for you, depending on your needs. So I hope that also helps. Let's move on now and just talk to the platform itself. So building live, this is where things should be interesting. So the paradigm of Count is very simple, and how we build metric trees is it very much fits to this paradigm. As you can see down here, we have various object menus. This is a way you can add objects into the canvas. So this is a post-it note, which we can use to, as you can imagine, to lay out ideas. We can add screenshots into here. I could put a piece of our own UI in here to start annotating. We can build process flow maps. These are kind of the tools you might be used to seeing in a whiteboard. And they're here because they're so useful for the whole of the workflow building a metric tree or any use case you plan to use Count for. And then alongside that, we have this paradigm of cells. And cells are effectively blocks of code which you're using to execute on either a database or in the canvas. And cells can be SQL. You can also have Python cells in here. I can bring these results into a Python cell. I can also build visuals in here as well, using a kind of a drag and drop low code UI on the right. So I can, for example, build a quick bar chart here. The key idea of cells is that they are modular. Any cell can use the results of any other previous cell to give you this analytical DAG. And if I was to, for example, come into this query here and remove the last line, this kind of limit 20, you'll see that those results will then cascade through the downstream cells in here as well. And this is a very powerful way to iterate and collaborate with people as you're exploring data. So let's now talk about metric trees and how to build a metric tree in Count. And ultimately, what we're using here are the same building blocks that we have here, but we're using that to build out a workflow which allows us to get to an end result like this. But it's a fact you have all these different tools which lets you do this in a way which engages not just the analyst, but also lets the analyst communicate and collaborate on the metric tree building with business stakeholders and also with maybe back-end engineers on the business logic changes. So let's now use a bit of time to just walk through how these all fit together to build a metric tree, and then we'll talk about a few hints and tips. The core idea of building metric trees in Count is that, as with any other principle of the platform, transparency and collaboration are really, really important. Where we've seen metric tree initiatives fail is when, in fact, generally any data report could fail, is when there is what we call the grand reveal. What really is quite difficult to get traction is when a data team goes away, builds a report in complete isolation in a waterfall development cycle, and then lands this grand reveal of an asset, which the receivers of it have no way to interrogate, understand, or engage with. And this is where a lot of wasted work happens, because you've built something which they don't use or trust or needs much more iteration. And so the power of Count for our customers is it allows them to go through that full journey in an agile way, where the building of the metric tree is not just the data function, is actually the wider business at the same time. So let's start building a metric tree, and we can show you how this all fits together. So what I'm going to use for this data for this metric tree is actually some data we have in DBT. Count has a DBT core integration, which lets you use your data modeling logic within the canvas, and you can edit it and push it back to DBT via GitHub integration as you choose. So I want to build a metric tree out of this table of data, which is on NBA players. I want to understand and build a metric tree on like how these teams are performing and what's leading to their success. So we've already brought in here a fact table. We already have this in our data model in DBT. And you can see we can see here we've got different metrics like number of wins, number of losses. We've got seasons played. We've got a lot of metrics in already. So we can use this. In fact, we can see this table to help us start to scope out the structure of the tree straight away. So I'm going to use some post-it notes to define a tree. And again, the goal of this is that this is a collaborative environment. I can bring in my stakeholders in here to work this through with me and get a first pass of the metrics I want to build in the hierarchy. So here we go. Win percentage is my North Star metric. I now want to look at what drives win percentage, where it's number of games won and number of games lost. And I can keep building this tree out, and I can keep referring different data assets in my database to help me picture and build out the different metrics. As you can see here, we're actually referring here to the database as a materialized table in my database. But actually, I want to do something else here. I want to not bring in a query in my database directly. I want to bring in the logic that builds that table from DBT, so I can see that, and actually include the models which are upstream of that in case I need to make changes to the metrics. So let me just add that in. Let me show you what I've done here. Here's my post-it note hierarchy that we're building. This is now, this cell here is the same data I showed you before, but now we're building this table up using the queries that are in my DBT project. And as you can see, this is the gingerfied SQL. I can see the compiled version next to it. I'm doing this because I want to make sure that if I need to make a change to metrics that we've already got in the business, I can see that logic and understand the changes and do that in a collaborative as part of the project. So right now I can see that we have this fact table, and this fact table actually is built by looking at these different models. So I'm going to go look at this model here, which is where a lot of the tables are built. And actually, for example, I want to look at the next layer of detail below this tree, and actually want to look at, say, the average points scored for a particular group of players. So the problem we've got right now is that this metric is defined as a sum. So if I look up here and look at points scored, it's a sum. So I want to make that change to average instead. And you'll see that that change isn't going to change my production DBT production, but it's just I'm making that change in here, and I can prototype and see how that change cascades through into my base table. Now, I also want to look at this not just for all the players here. I want to have filtered this down and just look at it for a particular team, which the team I think I'm going to look at, let's say, is Toronto. So most played city equals Toronto. As you can see, what I'm doing here is I have now got not just the scoping of my metric tree, I've actually got the tables and the data that we'll be building from, and the business logic that we have upstream of what's materialized in our database in case I want to make changes. If I wanted to then push this change back into DBT at the end of the project, I can turn on, make this extra table as well part of that change. I can turn on the DBT flag, and I can commit to GitHub. And you can see that I'm now able to see the code diff between DBT and this the original model, average to sum. And I've also added in a new model called C, which is the new cell I made, which has got the filter on the parent model. This means if I wanted to commit this, that I can then push this into our database, and then at the end of the project, once I finish building my metric tree, I could redirect this metric tree to look at materialized data. But while I want to work this through, I can look at do modeling, scoping, and analysis all in one environment and see the full lineage of that workflow before I push to a production environment. Okay, so we're still building here. Actually, I'm going to do a bit of a Blue Peter, if you know the reference. I'm going to actually show you a quick example of how I would build this. And I'll then show you the full-fledged thing. So over here, we have what we call a metric card. This is actually, all this is a selection of empty cells and some boxes and text boxes to make a kind of nice metric card like this. Now, I'm just going to build the top one here. I'm going to make this clear that I want this to be win percentage. And I'm going to give it a description. Toronto, was it? And then I'm going to build this very quickly by pointing this at cell C, which is the one I just made for Toronto. And then I'm going to build the win percentage simply by dragging that win percentage thing into the text box of this cell. And I'm going to average that now. And then I'm going to make sure that it's looked at as a percentage. There we go. Now, the same thing I'll do here. I'm going to build this visual by pointing this at cell C being this cell over here, cell C. And then I'm going to build a chart off this table looking at win percentage, but over by season, like that. And I'm going to make that not an aggregation. Okay, so now we have win percentage. This is still a sum, make this an average. And then I'm still going to then make sure that this is displayed as a percentage. I'll also make sure this is also displayed as plain text to make sure the comma goes away. So here we go. Here's our first tile. We've built that out. And more importantly, I can now click on this metric and I can follow through the arrows to understand the logic for how this was built. And I can then follow the chain back through as I want to before I push this into a production, these model in business logic into a production environment. So I've done all that. I'm going to now actually bring in some other pre-made cells into this if I wanted to do that. But as you can see, what we're doing here is that we're literally just using the fact that we can modularize these queries like so, to then I can quickly build out these layers by simply just changing the metric from average to something else. I could bring in here sort of wins, and that'd be a sum. Could do the same thing here, make this wins rather than sum. So that's now looking at the next post-it note. And I can do this again on the right-hand side as well. I could make this losses instead. I won't keep building this, but I hope you get the idea of how quick it is and how easy it is to sort of build out the layers of your tree. Once you have a well-formatted card, you can then just duplicate it, place it, just like you were doing this in a mirror board or PowerPoint. But this is now looking at the live data as you go through. And when I finish my metric tree, I can place it in what we call a frame. This is obviously very plain. And then I actually can choose to share it with the business as in our report mode like this. So it can actually be seen as a presentable asset without showing any logical working before that if you want to make this a productionized report. I hope that makes sense. I'm now going to quickly switch to showing you a fully worked out example. So let me just share this slide instead. So here we have a full metric tree, which is 61 metrics, which maps a full B2B SaaS business from a North Star metric of MRR split by different types of MRR, net new, expansion, retained, churned, etc. And you can see here that same card where we have the change versus previous days, the number, the trend line. And this has all been built out to show and let you drill down through the entire growth model of a business all the way through as I want to go down it. It's a lot of metrics, but as you can imagine, the metrics are relatively straightforward to build, mostly just aggregations at this point. Then they are built off, normally we built off DBT models. In this case, we're using CSV files to show you the data architects that exist here and how it's all built out. I'll share this example with you at the end of the webinar. But this is just giving you a sense of the scale which Count lets you see your metrics and clarify what's going on. Here, we've chosen to add frames, which are kind of like slides, to different branches of the tree so that you can choose to split them down into subsections and report on them at different cadences to different teams. But they all come back into this one single canvas so that you can do a company-wide walkthrough and see the lineage all the way through the business. A lot of our customers have built things at the scale. Others have just done it by department. As you can see, the scale of the canvas allows you to pick and choose that. And you can also set alerts to push different frames into different parts of your business at a time of your choosing. So this frame 1 here, I could choose to send this to sales@count.co, or I could choose the general channel of my Slack channel, and I could choose to subscribe that to get a PNG of this report every day as I choose, which means people can consume it without even opening Count up. So I hope that this has been a helpful, quick view of the way that Count can not only let you get to a metric tree, but do this in a way which involves the full workflow of scoping, data modeling, visualization in one tool. The real win of doing this in Count is that you are able to do this exercise across the business and involve the right people at the right time to make sure it's a jointly owned exercise, that you'll clarify people's understanding as you go, improving data quality as you build, defining better metrics as you walk through it. And once you get to the point you have a metric tree like this, you end up having what we call the virtuous cycle. And the virtuous cycle is that the more clear your business feels to everyone who's looking at the metric tree, the better the investigations, the better the questions that they're asking of the data team to go investigate how to improve the growth model even further. And that leads to better exploratory analysis and better data modeling and data engineering projects to make sure that the growth model is getting better and better and better. To give you a sense of how Count can help with this, here are just another examples of trees, not necessarily metric trees, being used to structure the presentation of problem solves and improving the growth model that your master metric tree shows. So 2 quick examples. This one here is what we call an onboarding funnel. This is still a kind of a tree, but it's showing you the process flow map of users going through a mobile application, where you can see the metrics and the stages of a user's going through this, so you can understand the bottlenecks in this process and where it can improve. This would be a classic example of a use case you might take once you understand that there's a big challenge in email source signups, for example, and I want to investigate what's going on there. I would then use Count to map the process, understand what's driving that metric in a very clear, transparent visualization, but using trees to map out information flow or user journeys, not so that every step of the growth model. Or it can be used to do investigation analysis and allowing analysts to structure an ambiguous problem down to sections. Here's a request to sort of understand how you can rerun promotions. And again, this example taken from a real customer, they've mapped a tree to help break the story apart, to help the business think through the problem, not just present the numbers. Okay, I think that is exactly on the money of 30 minutes that I promised to go through most of the content. Let me just talk you through a few next steps if it's interesting to you. And I will finish with questions. As you can see here, after the session, we will share the recording, and we'll also share some further metric tree resources, including that fully fledged metric tree case study that I shared about 5 minutes ago. And then, of course, if you're interested in building metric trees, or you have experience of it, or thinking through it and want to get in touch to understand more how we can be helpful, please reach out to us. Either drop us an email at hello@count.co, or reach out to our custom support channels on our website. And we also have a metric tree masterclass series starting in July, which we'll include in the after session email. This is actually a kind of 4-part webinar series going through metric trees in like a fully fledged course, starting off with industry experts and how metric trees have been evolving, how to use them. We'll go through, interview 3 different Count customers, Clio, Bumble, and Mubi are going to be there, answering questions about how they led a full metric tree initiative in their organization. And then we'll also do another deeper dive on how to use Count to build out metric trees as well, and all the implications of that for a data team's organization. For now, I think that's the kind of end of the structured content. I hope that's been helpful. I recognize we've covered a lot of ground very quickly. Hopefully the video will help you go over it a bit more, but obviously feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Until then, please, if you want to drop me an email or ask some questions down in the chat, please do, and we can stick around for another 10 minutes or so or more if people have further questions. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us offline. Thank you. While we're waiting for questions to come through, I'm going to just go back and share this there's 61 metrics in one place, so you can see how the whole thing fits together. If people are wanting to stick around, I have a few sort of topics like I know we didn't quite cover in full detail, mostly about going through the initiative and scoping. But if anyone has any questions, I'd love to prioritize that over sort of a bit of a hints and tips session. Hi, Joseph. Thank you for answering in the Q&A. I didn't realize that we had the chat disabled, so thank you. So just to clarify, there's a Q&A option available to you in the bottom right corner. If you go to the three different shapes called activities and go to Q&A, you can use that to ask questions. So Joseph asked a question. Going through Q&A's chat is disabled right now. Thank you for flagging that. Well done. Are there metric tree thresholds that can be used for alerts? Yes, that's a very helpful point. Thank you for flagging that. So we do have a feature in Count called alerts, and as we discussed, you can use alerts on individual cells or on an entire frame. So, for example, this is an alert I set up here called frame 1, which is going to basically make this entire blue box a thing which can be pushed via email or into Slack or just give you an alert. But you can set a trigger for an alert. It doesn't can be on a schedule by default. And it can be a custom schedule, say daily, hourly, or monthly, or even the fourth Wednesday of the month if you want to use a cron logic. And then you can also choose a trigger. So if you use a trigger, you can say, I want you to send me this. I want to send me this frame if and when, for example, this metric A52, not very well named, I must be honest. A52. I want you to send me this thing if a particular cell hits a certain threshold, and I can define that as a first row matched, rows returned, query error, or an arbitrary query which is set to run. So, for example, I could choose this C again and set a condition that current is greater than 0.5 or 1 or something. So this then allows you to have track a metric like this and ping you if and only if a threshold goes, say, 1 standard deviation above the average of the last month. And so you can have both the visualization here, but then have a number of queries which are giving you the triggers of this, and they can be arbitrary logic in Python or SQL to help you then trigger when it gets sent, otherwise, other than just a schedule. Hope that answered the question, Joseph. I can obviously go through that in more detail later. An anonymous question about, can you apply filters to an entire tree? Yes, absolutely you can. So, for example, what I haven't talked you through is another cell type we call filter cells, to be honest with you. They're quite simple. So filter cells basically give you a way to parameterize dimensions or metrics in your logic so that you can then have dry filters. I'll just do a very, very quick, simple example of this. So, for example, let's say I want to build a filter this query here down by a certain number, for example, like a slider. So I can come in here, I can have a slider, and let's set this to 250 for the moment, or 300. I can now use this within here to say where first payment amount equals payment date. I can also then have a query in here which is looking at first payment date, where I can add in another where clause where first payment date or first payment amount even is equal to select star from G. I could use Ginger here, or I can use a nested SQL statement, and that is going to connect up. When I run that, that's going to connect up this cell to this one. So that currently there's nothing on 250. Let's put it to from 260, put 250. Now you can see that's now populating this again. So I'm now able to drive the results of this cell, anything downstream of that, using logic. So I hope that helps the person who's anonymous in terms of how you can apply filters, because this filter now is powering the entire of this. Let's make this very large. This is now powering the entire tree. If I update this, you're seeing this metric is changing. So this is how you can build different filters to control different things. Hope that helps. If anyone else has found the Q&A section, please feel free to answer to jump in. Otherwise, the last thing I wanted to make sure I pointed out was just some hints and tips. As you can see, that the critical key to success of a metric tree initiative is to do it in an agile way, to make it a collaborative and do a collaborative way where you're iterating towards a solution rather than a waterfall development. That can be if you want to do that, could be literally starting with just post-it notes and building out a kind of a definition of a metric tree before you even touch any line of code. It could be a combination using some tables of metric trees, so you can sort of say, these are the metrics we've already got in our data model, and here's how I want to map them if you have that level of maturity. It could be that you build a very simple metric tree without much fidelity using real data to show how it all fits together. The key is that you engage and get feedback early, because it's very likely as you go through this process, you'll be doing exploratory analysis and doing and discussing these metrics as you build. And there probably will be some the business as they engage with the project you'll realize that some of the metrics you're following may not be quite right. There may be some data quality issues as you're building the metrics, and all of that is part of the journey of leading the business to a simpler understanding of what's going on. So the first definition is start early, start rough, and make it an agile project. The other big part of this is to recognize that if the metric tree is doing its job and that virtuous cycle gets created, you want the metric tree to change, not necessarily every day, but you want it to the shape of it and to evolve and improve as you get more clarity of your metrics. What I mean by that is you build a metric tree based on your understanding of how these different metrics relate to each other. So, for example, this is quite a clear relationship. Open new business opportunities and the rate of closing gives you acceptance, gives you the next metric. But it is possible that you have some of these trees are slightly more indirect, maybe. So, for example, it could be that you have new email subscribers. That's what I'll give an example. You could have organic signups, for example. Like, we don't quite know what's driving organic traffic. We don't know how to build out this tree. You might have some indicative measures you want to put in here to start off with, because you haven't got a truly clear view of it yet. This would then lead you to investigate what is driving organic traffic, so you can define what are the next level of detail this tree should be. And it's great that you can let that level of detail in. If organic traffic was an initiative you're focusing on, you want to make sure that your whole idea of the business is to map what is the next level of detail down and how you can improve that. You want the metric tree to grow. And again, it's a really important part of how the data team can help facilitate and make sure there is a very well governed tree that you're making progress on. It's not a one-off done thing. It's a mindset thing that the metric tree clarity is a core part of how you build. Absolutely, Joseph. Yes, once you've got the data, underlying data, and the metrics in the same place, you suddenly have a great environment where you can do, you can actually start to do mapping, or at least of like what is the correlation of this line, basically, because you've got and what's driving it. You can start to do forecasting because these metrics also being defined and they're in your data model. You can then do follow-up analysis to sort of improve the edge. So it's not uncommon actually to find teams using the metric tree and actually almost putting post-it notes on the metric tree to say, initiative X is going to improve this metric. Read more about initiative X over here. And then you have a hyperlink to another canvas, for example, which I'll just take in a quick example from another tab. And you're just linking to another canvas like that, or I could be dumping it as a hyperlink in here. And that means you're actually using the tree to not only give the operational context, but you're also linking it back to improvement initiatives which have mapped to the growth model. Again, this could be at a department level, or it could be a whole business as well. So that's how, again, you can imagine the data team operation changing, because you're not just providing numbers, suddenly you're starting to help the business manage its improvement opportunities as well. You can map OKRs, for example, to different one of these metrics, forecast what's going to change as well. The final thing I'll say about metric trees is for our most advanced customers, they have metric trees at a full business level like this, and also have sub trees maybe for problem solving, like I described down here, or just like what they wanted to keep the kind of top level ones separate to other like lower level ones by different departments. What I would say is, when building a metric tree, where you start depends on the business context you're in. If there's pull from the CEO or the exec to help understand the growth model better, go for the full company one off the bat. If you've got a particular stakeholder who's really engaging with you on wanting to improve product marketing or improving product performance or sales, start with the department which has got the most interest and you think there's most interest in doing this exercise with them. Showcase the power of metric tree for the wider organization, and then you can just go through different departments as you go to complete that kind of clarity of the whole business growth model over a few different projects. Certainly, going straight for a full company growth model, getting every stakeholder to agree is only worth doing when you have that top level engagement. Gaston's has just asked a question. Have you seen examples of metric trees that resemble a graph rather than a tree? So, for example, various departments linking to each other and not just the North Star metric. I can imagine the graph could get quite complex. Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. We haven't seen it so far as like a metric trees, I guess, are very focused on like the levers of like the trying to distinguish the kind of the link the kind of abstract links between different activities and how they influence other ones towards the top North Star metric. But the tree paradigm, we have seen people mapping like their core business processes and how different departments work together through sort of mapping information flow, Jira tickets, depending on the business, could be orders, could be anything, and using the tree paradigm, a graph of information, and you can obviously do that also in Count, which is sort of the process flow mapping or graph mapping. So it may be they're not mapping the metric. The currency here may not be metrics like number or percentage. It could be, as it is here, number of users, or it could be number of lorries, it could be number of orders, it could be number of support tickets. And so, yes, it's the paradigm works, the layout, the principles of transparency, flexibility, and operational clarity applies to any kind of paradigm you choose. This is actually one of my favorite examples, as you can see here, which is the metric here is all users all the way through, whereas a metric tree, you're kind of moving between different activity types, sign-ups, suspects. You're changing the paradigm as of the sort of the unit of count as you go. So we have seen people do different types of trees. Gaston is the answer to your question. Yes, thank you. Happy to discuss more if there's a particular use case you had in mind, but generally that's a kind of general principle. Thanks so much for these questions. It's really great to hear you engaging with it. I'm going to probably just shrink this back down to make it slightly less in the way, but hopefully that's helped you envisage how this would work. As I said, the key idea of the canvas, it gives you the scale, but the report mode does allow it to become a thing which you can make operational. You can make it as a replacement to a dashboard as well. What will maybe be interesting to you, most of our customers find that as they go on the journey, they start to run meetings off the actual canvas view, because you can just zoom around and actually the power is to see all this in one place. But it by no means is it I think you have to enforce upon your stakeholders if they're used to seeing sort of more static reports or at least see more of an operational cadence. Thanks so much, everyone. Well, I think if there's any more questions, I'll wait around for another minute, but otherwise I think we'll finish there. And please watch out for your inboxes for follow-up email. We'll hopefully share what we can to help you get going with this initiative and share some resources. And also, as I said before, also happy to help you if you're thinking about how to execute on this. And we can happily help you think it through and talk you through a more detailed review. Thank you so much.